Hello. In this video tutorial, we're going to cover how to create your own global events. So first we'll do it by creating our own global events from scratch, in this case to disable a next button when we arrive on a page, and then how to re-enable that next button when the activity has been completed. Then we will take a look at how to use the built-in template global events, which are very similar. And then finally, we'll take a look at a couple more advanced use cases. So first, we're going to create our own global events. So this starter lesson normally comes with some global events that we could hook into, but we've disabled that for now, and we'll do it manually. So global events have two parts. Usually we fire a global event on a particular page, and it communicates to the master page to do whatever we want it to do. So in this case, when we arrive on this page, we want to fire a global event that says to disable the navigation or just the next button. And then on the master, we will create another action that catches that and does whatever we need it to do. Because although we can see the navigation items here and even select them, we can't create actions on them because they're on a completely separate master that exists across multiple pages. So we can't directly affect those objects, which is why we need to use a global event to communicate from page 5 up to the master. So let's go ahead and get started with that. So the first thing that we need to do is fire a global event. So we'll do that on page load. So we'll create a page on load trigger. And then we need to fire our global event. So we'll go to page and scroll down until we find this fire global event. So here we can call this global event whatever we want it to. We could call it disable next. We could call it disable navigation. It doesn't really matter. It's just whatever we call it, we also need to listen for that same name. So we'll use disable navigation here. And then we can also send a parameter. We're not going to do that in this situation, but it's also possible to send along additional information. The built-in global events that we have usually just say disable, and then it sends a parameter of next or navigation, but we won't worry about that for now. We're just going to make up our own disable navigation global event. So that's all we need to do here on this page. Let's go over to the master. And I'm going to go ahead and just create a new canvas for us to work in, and we'll call this global events. So there we go. So now we need to listen for that global event that we just fired. So we'll go over to page, and one of the trigger blocks here is global event. So we'll grab that. We need a when do block, so we'll grab that. And here we need to listen for that specific global event. So I'll just type in here the exact same name that we used earlier, which was disable navigation. So when the master page hears disable navigation, we now need to define what it's going to do. In this case, it's going to disable any sort of navigational elements, the next button, the back button, the menu. If the menu is already open, maybe we'll hide that. So I'll go over to my next button and say set next enabled to false. And then do the same thing for the back button, the home button, the menu button, and then if the menu layer is already open, we're going to want to hide that as well. So let's return to our page. And whenever you're testing global events, when you preview here in the authoring mode, it's kind of a toss-up whether the page level is going to load first or the master. So usually what I like to do just to be safe is go back one page. So we'll go back to our key point page, preview from there, and then enter the page like we normally would. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, so here's our key point page. We're going to hit next. And now when we arrive on this page, we've disabled all of the navigational elements. And the point is, once people have completed whatever activity there is, we'll fire another global event that will then enable the navigation. So right now they're kind of locked out. So that part of the global event is working. Let's go ahead and set up our other action to re-enable the navigation. So we want to enable that navigation when all three of these layers have been viewed, the pop-up layers 1, 2, and 3. So we'll go to the stack, we'll grab the trigger block for the stack, and we'll change it from on layer change to on all layers viewed. So when that happens, we're going to fire another global event. And we'll just make up whatever event name we want. So in this case, we'll just call it enable navigation. And if I want to, I can just copy this text because I'll need it in a moment. So this will fire to re-enable the navigation. So we'll return to the master. And then we'll need to create a new global event action here that handles enable navigation. So because it's going to do pretty much all the same things as this, I'm just going to duplicate this entire action and then start changing things. So we'll change the global event, we'll call it enable navigation, and then we'll set all of these to true. And we don't need to show the menu layer, so we'll just delete that action block. So now we have a disable navigation global event and an enable navigation global event. So again, we'll return to the flow. And I'm going to preview again from the previous page. So we'll use this little drop down next to my preview and preview from the key point page. All right, so here's our key point page. We're going to enter the page like normal. And all of our navigation stuff has been disabled. And then when I view each of the different layers, then the global event fires to re-enable all of that navigation. So that works pretty well, and we can actually do the same thing on the next page. So let's go to our large pop-ups. And this is a pretty similar page. So again, we can say page on load, fire a global event to disable the navigation. And then when all of these layers have been viewed, we can fire the enable navigation. And then this page should work just fine. And this trigger, if we say had a video on this particular page, we could say when the video is done or on end, that's when we enable the navigation. If there's audio, we could say when that is done. If it's drag and drop, we can make sure that they've dropped everything, or only when the feedback is shown, that sort of thing. So for kind of the quiz section where you have many questions in a row, you might disable the navigation when they arrive on each of those pages. And then it's not even really necessary to enable the navigation because the quiz questions just allow you to move on to the next page anyway. So things get a little bit tricky if you only disable parts of the navigation. So let's go back to our master, and rather than disabling all of the navigational elements, let's just disable the next button. So we'll just pull these out for now. And let's go ahead and preview from that key point page again. All right, here we go. So we're going to enter this page, and now we are only disabling the next button. And then when we viewed everything, the next button is enabled. But what happens if we start going backwards? So here I am on this page, and we go backwards. This is still disabled because we fired that global event. But now if we leave this page and go backwards again, that next button is still disabled. We never fired the enable navigation or enable next global event. So this is basically just disabled forever. So we do need to create a couple of actions that clean up what happens whenever we switch pages. So we'll do that back on the master. because we don't want to lock people out of the navigation if they're going to travel in different ways. So here we can just create an action that says on page load or on page change, we're going to re-enable the next button. So this means when we preview from that key point page, as we go forward, the next button is disabled. If we hit back, it's going to re-enable that next button. So now we have it available to us when we need it. We move forward onto a page that says to turn this off, so that turns it off. When we've completed whatever activity is on this page, it's enabled. And then when we go to the new page, basically this page on change setting enable to true is firing, and then our global event to disable it is firing just a moment later, and that's getting disabled. So this sort of works out the way we want it to. So that's just something to keep in mind. If you're not completely perfectly locking out all of the navigation, you do need to create some actions to kind of clean up after these global events if you allow people to move in different directions. So now let's take a look at one of our starter lessons that hasn't been modified. So all of our templates, our master template navigation templates, all have some global events built into them, basically all of the master stuff that's ready to be hooked into. So let's take a quick look at how those work. So this already has a global event called disable, and then you can send along a parameter of next or navigation. And this event parameter block can be found under variable. It's here. So it's a little bit different from the way that we just built it, but it works in pretty much the same way. So we send disable and then specify if it's just the next button we want to disable or all of the navigation. And then similarly, there's an enable global event that's here on the master, and we pass along the next or navigation parameter. And then there are some other actions in here that handle sort of the cleanup, dealing with the back and the next button. So in order to use these, it's pretty simple. We just go to the page that we want to use, and we fire those same global events. So on page load, we fire a global event, and the format has already been defined for us. We type in disable, and then if we want just the next button disabled, we type in next into here. And then when the activity is completed, so when stack 1, all layers have been viewed, we just fire enable and next. So these have already been set up for us, so let's go ahead and preview from the page before. So as we arrive on our page 5, it's disabling the next button. When the activity has been completed, it's then enabling it. And if we wanted to switch this to navigation, we can do so. So now it's disabling all of our navigation elements when the activity has been completed. The next button, the previous button, and the menu button all become available. So it's a little bit easier to use because everything's already been set up for you. And it's already got some neat features. For example, if we go to page 6 and then return to page 5, there's some logic in the template that says to not disable these buttons. That can be turned on or off. And if you need to make any modifications to these global events, you can do so on the master. So there's a logic to ignore the disable event if they have gone past that page. This could be turned off or removed. And if we wanted to, say, add our home button in here and disable it, we can do that. And then we just need to make sure that we re-enable it when we want it. So now that we know how global events work, we can take a look at a couple more advanced use cases. In this case, this is a branching scenario that's already been built using our templates, and it uses global events once again to communicate from regular pages out to the various masters. So the background and meter and the character master, which you can see here and here. So this works the same way. The template actions are a little bit more advanced because they have to tie into the template wizard, but you can define how many points get added or subtracted from each answer choice and what emotion is chosen for the character. So we can see here there are just some global events. There's the character emotion on arrival, and then a global event is fired to add or subtract however many points, and then another global event is fired to switch the character emotion. So these are fired here as part of the template, and then on the masters, we have our background and meter master, which captures the meter event, and it's going to just add that value, whatever it is, positive or negative. And then if it's a positive value, it's going to show some green text, wait a moment, and then hide it. And if it's a negative value, it's going to show some red text, wait a moment, and then hide it. And then this is another global event that's used on a different page to basically start the meter either in the middle or at whatever value you want to start it at. Similarly, the character here has a stack with a bunch of different emotions in it and a global event of character, and then whatever event parameter is sent, neutral, unhappy, happy, will switch to the appropriate emotion layer. So 9 times out of 10, you will use global events to communicate from a regular page up to control something on the master, usually to update a meter, disable navigation, disable resources, something like that. However, there are occasions where you might want to communicate in the other direction. So for example, let's say we had a closed caption button here that was always available, and when it's clicked, we wanted to show some text on a regular page that's been defined as our closed captions. So let's go ahead and set that up really quick. We will create a new button here. We'll just duplicate one of these. And we'll change the icon. So we have a CC icon, and we'll create a new canvas to work with, and we'll rename this button closed caption button. So when closed caption button has been clicked, we might fire a global event that says show captions. And I'll copy that so I don't mistype it later. And then on a regular page, we'll pretend that this page has some sort of audio narration. We can add a text object. And then we can turn off the start visible property and then capture that global event. And when we hear it, we're just going to show this closed caption text. So when we preview this page, initially we would hear whatever audio there is, and then if somebody clicked closed caption button, it would show the closed caption text. And we could decorate this or change it however we want. Or we could create a more advanced system that uses variables so that once you turn on the closed captions, it stays on, and once you turn them off, they stay off for future pages. It's a little bit more advanced than what we're going to go into here, but the mechanism for communicating from the master to a regular page works just as well as going from a regular page out to a master.